Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. Thank you for your attention while this important legal information is reviewed. What you hear should not replace consultation with an attorney and should not be considered advice for your situation. On behalf of the Pilot Lawyer and your entire crew, it's our pleasure to have you aboard.
Welcome, aviators, to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast with us, the Ison Brothers at the Ison Law Firm. We're here to help pilots and those who want to become pilots navigate the FAA medical certification process. And of course, as we say around the office, if you're not laughing, you're crying your eyeballs out. And for the next 30 minutes, we hope to bring you the lighter side of what can otherwise be a frustrating process.
You forgot the part about whether you're laughing with us or laughing at us or crying with us.
I said you're either laughing.
Well, let us tell you about what we were laughing at and crying about all at once. We have just arrived back in the office here at the mothership in Lakeland, Florida, following a 3-day jaunt.
We're back at headquarters.
We're back at headquarters, having gone to Atlanta, Georgia for a trial. We were at the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta. We had a falsification trial where we represented a client.
Our hotel was right next to where the Beyonce concert was being held.
That was eye-opening.
We didn't attend.
No.
We attended the outside element.
We watched. We saw.
There was a lot to see.
We drove around downtown Atlanta. On the way, the morning of the trial, saw a man wiping his bottom,
His keister, on the side of the street. His pants were
down around his knees.
Yep.
It was, of all the big cities I've ever been in, I've been in them all. I've never seen that. That's crazy.
I stood there.
Now,
I don't think Topeka counts as a big city, though.
Well, hey, depends on your perception. But I guess I haven't purposely put myself in positions in some of these cities.
You
to
put
see
yourself
stuff like
purposely in that position this time?
No. Well, I guess I did. I had to go.
We stood there slackjaw.
What is this guy doing?
As this guy was.
That's how it's done?
Taking care of business. I didn't know you could use newspaper.
What?
That's a technique I've never thought of.
That's
crazy.
We had a lot of commentary on that following the trip back home. We just arrived back in the office today, and we've immediately come into this session.
The question
for
is,
you all.
Studio.
The question there, though, is it would Jesus have said, "Oh man, there's a guy wiping his derriere," or would he? What would have happened there with Jesus? That's what I want to know. And I just think that the homeless population might be different now than it was 2,000 plus years ago. And
You're getting
more
such
opportunity
a
now. Is what you're
philosophical
saying.
I'm trying to
debate
roll
here.
this into our theological podcast.
Yeah.
The pilot sermon.
Well, that's on you. I'll
pilot
sit that one out.
The pilot on the mount.
Pilot pastor.
Anyhow, so looking at where we've been and what we've seen.
We've seen the world.
We've seen the full moon.
What are we supposed to talk about here today?
Here's what we're talking about today. We're talking about preparing for the HIMS program. It occurred to me that there may be individuals out there that may not know what to expect when they are confronted with needing to attend the HIMS program for purposes of establishing their eligibility for an FAA medical certificate.
This is just now occurring to you?
Yes. I thought maybe
after all these episodes and all these years.
What number is this?
We finally have built our core content. Now we can go into
Side quests,
yes. And so we can start. This is more of a comfort quest for those. How many
people in the HIMS program are probably going to listen to this? I wish I knew that sooner.
I probably know.
So thanks
none
a lot.
Of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that being said, what I want to accomplish with this episode is to establish sort of an understanding of why would you go in the HIMS program for a substance-related concern, and what would you expect as far as what the FAA is looking for. Now, I have to make a caveat that there is going to be a difference between what maybe if you're an airline pilot or a company man or woman, what the company might expect from an employment perspective versus what the the FAA might expect, I would recommend that you engage with union counsel if you have union counsel or employment counsel to ascertain what exactly your employer might be expecting as it relates to your engagement with the HIMS program, if there is such an expectation. Our musings today will come from a perspective of what will the FAA expect as it relates to your eligibility to hold a medical certificate in keeping with their general expectations for special issuance authorizations for individuals holding medical certification with a history of substance abuse or substance dependence, as those conditions are defined under the regulations.
Where was all this silver-tongued devilry yesterday at trial?
I was sitting there thinking, man, I could really slice through and dice through with my tongue on these questions, and you left me untapped.
I was up there like a fish out of water, floundering
You didn't wave
around.
your hand for the tag in.
I know. I should have tapped out.
Should have WWF'd it.
Well, there were a couple of WTF moments, though.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Now, that being said, allow me to sort of set the scene for these individuals. Set the scene. Maybe you've recently been the subject of a driving under the influence charge. You were arrested for DUI. So there may be a circumstance where your company, if you're an airline person, comes along and says, hey, well, you got to go with the HIMS program. You're going to have to go to this intake meeting evaluation at this treatment facility, and we're going to expect you to go into the HIMS program. Now, I think
In the lead up to this episode, when Anthony said that, I said we should make the following statement. Perhaps you should pump the brakes harder than you did before the DUI. Going into the
sure. We want to
I don't know if
alienate
that was a
those-
funny joke or not.
I don't think
Press
so.
1 if you believe it's funny, and 2 if you don't think it's funny.
That being said, you need to first understand the underlying mechanics of why you would be going to the HIMS program in the first place. Our perception and what the FAA does on a daily basis. So I'm only giving you what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, it's also based on having tried cases.
Yes,
Having
yes.
had testimony from FAA experts, having deposed those experts, had them testify at trial.
Correct.
Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so it's not like we're just coming up with this out of thin air.
Yeah. This is what we've
What we've
the
been
tracker.
told.
Yeah, and what we've seen, and what we do.
I got it on a little scrap of paper.
So your substance abuse and substance dependence under the regulations. Our perception is that the actual HIMS program is only applicable to those individuals which meet criteria for substance dependence. Now, that's not to say that for substance abuse, you won't have some elements of the HIMS program, i.e., you may very well need to have a HIMS AME oversee ongoing random urinalysis and to check in with you every 3 months. You may have to engage in some level of peer-to-peer meetings like AA, Smart Recovery, and you may have to see a HIMS psychiatrist. But we don't really consider that the HIMS program. We consider that what some call HIMS Light. And I'm going to call that LITE, not LIGHT. You're not seeing the light here, sweetheart. It's HIMS Light. So let's separate HIMS Light from the actual
Could it be a
HIMS program.
buckaroo?
It's a buckaroo. That being said, what is substance dependence? Substance dependence is defined at CFR 67.107.207 and .307. It's the same thing from first, second, and third class standards across the board. Now, it's a bit different than clinical standards, right? So it's possible you could go to your doctor and say, hey, do I have an alcohol problem? They say, oh, get out of here. What are you talking about? You're wasting my time. And I'm going to charge you for this visit. No. Whereas the FAA could very well say from a regulatory perspective, a more risk mitigation perspective, say, yeah, we think you meet criteria for substance dependence. This is crazy. Now, I'll also add that the clinical side, your doctor's office, they're not using the term substance dependence. Substance dependence is not a term you'll see thrown around by doctors and medical professionals. They use the DSM-5 standard, which is identified as substance use disorder. Substance dependence, though, is what the FAA utilizes. That's their term for it. And it's a lifetime look back. So that's what kind of grabs people and throws them against the wall. The problem is it's a lifetime look back. So if you had a DUI 25 years ago and you met one of these 4 criteria that I'm about to identify, you could very well have substance dependence today. It's just that you've not been in satisfactory recovery to federal air surgeon satisfaction. So essentially you've been in unrecovered substance dependence for, since that event occurred. So keep in mind, it's a lifetime look back, and there are 4 criteria that the FAA looks at. And if you meet one of these 4 criteria, you meet criteria for substance dependence. The first criteria being increased tolerance. So what is that? Increased tolerance, I feel like, is one criteria which the FAA throws around a lot. We have not ever really been able to get an understanding from the FAA, even at trial testimony and so on, as to where they got that number. Where did that number come from? It's just a number they've been using. And so with the DUI, they utilize 0.2 as the threshold concern for an increased tolerance. So if you're at a 0.2 and you're out there driving your car around, you're able to put your keys in your car, move your car down the road, you're able to engage with law enforcement and have these conversations back and forth, the FAA feels like that is what is identified. They identify as a purposeful function. In other words, if you were alcohol naive, right, you've never really had alcohol and so on, you wouldn't be expected to be able to have this functioning at a value where they think you should otherwise be comatose. So 0.2 is sort of the threshold default criteria that the FAA is looking for, especially in a DUI.
You might say to yourself, why 0.2? Why not some other number? And we've asked that question at trial.
I just said that. Are you listening? I just said we've asked that and they've never answered. Now,
no, but my point, though, to, I guess, build on what you said, was the response was from the expert at that trial. I don't know where that came from. I have it on the record.
That's correct. And
It's ridiculous.
I'll add that there has been recent case law at the National Transportation Safety Board, which is where these cases are litigated, that suggests that maybe 0.2 is not where, maybe that's not something that the FAA should be utilizing.
The end all be all.
Yeah. In the petition of Donald Parks, you can look that up and read that case law. There is a finding by the administrative law judge for the first time in forever, saying that, hey, using this point, I'm paraphrasing, using this 0.2, that's just a kind of a one-off number. We got to look at all the other factors, right? We got to look at, has this person had a history of alcohol use concerns and so on and so forth. So 0.2 is where the FAA, even despite that loss that the FAA had on that issue, they're continuing to pursue this idea that if you meet criteria for increased tolerance, if you hit that 0.2. So that's something to keep in mind. I think a lot of airlines, if you're working for an airline, you'll get on the horn with the HIMS folks and they ascertain what the BAC was in your DUI. And if they hear 0.2, usually that's going to throw them, off into oblivion. And they say, well, you got substance dependence. That'll happen quite a bit. One of the other prongs is manifestation of withdrawal symptoms. So that's a situation where individual may be having a difficult time discontinuing the substance of choice and are experiencing issues such as seizures, and other manifestations of physical reaction as a result of their inability to consume the substance at issue. That's a fairly obvious criteria, although there's some nuance to it and some argument perhaps to be given, but that's one we don't see quite as often, especially for people that are suddenly going into the HIMS program. Except for individuals who maybe have had a seizure, that's something that maybe is a bit more sudden. Impaired control of use is one of the other criteria. Impaired control of use. Essentially what that is, it's a bit, what is it, Alex?
Fugazi.
Yeah,
it's a fairy tale.
Who knows what that is, right? So it's subjective. Typically, though, in practice, we see this being identified as situations where individuals have a history of binge drinking to blackout. These are individuals who say, hey, I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow. Tomorrow rolls around. And all of a sudden, hey, I can't stop. I have this, what is it, sort of specifically, am I boring you with the yawning over there?
Continue on.
So it's a situation where, hey, I just cannot stop myself from consuming the substance. and I have an impaired control of use, or you have a history of using it to the extent beyond which would be sort of considered reasonable to the FAA.
Sounds like circular logic.
It's a circle something.
Has your FAA medical certificate been denied? Are you concerned you may not be able to get a medical certificate from the FAA? Are you at risk for FAA action for failing to report your medical history appropriately? Call the pilot lawyer at 1-855-FAA-1215 to discuss your options for getting the FAA to issue your medical certificate and get you flying. We are happy to evaluate your case and discuss with you a plan for presenting your case to the AME or the FAA. Aviation law is all we do, nothing else.
You said we were defining impaired control of use, and then you said, and I have a history of impaired control of use.
Yeah. So, like, if you're able to stop yourself, right? If you say, "Oh, yeah, I haven't drinking alcohol in 2 months," the question is, well, do you really? I mean, I think that would be evidence against impaired control of use, but the FAA again has a lifetime look back. So if you've had this history of drinking to an extent where it was difficult to maybe stop, the FAA could trigger that as an impaired control of use. And then lastly, we have this continued use despite damage to physical health or impairment to social, personal, or occupational functioning. This one's a little bit of a doozy, but typically that the FAA will identify this as, an individual maybe has more than one DUI. So if you get a second DUI, typically that will trigger this concern that there's been continued use despite impairment to social, personal, or occupational functioning. Or maybe an individual who's had some type of internal damage, right? They've had liver damage, for example, liver failure as a result of their alcohol use. Doctor says, hey, you need to stop drinking this. Alcohol is going to continue to damage your liver. You keep drinking the alcohol and it damages your liver. Those types of things. We've seen cases where people said, I get a headache after I drink alcohol. And the doctor puts that down in their records, and the individual, continues to drink alcohol, and, I get these headaches. Well, that could be considered continued use despite damage to physical health or impairment to personal function, or a situation where maybe your wife says, hey, if you don't stop drinking, I'm finally going to leave you. You're sorry, Keister. You'll be out on the street wiping your Keister in the streets of Atlanta. And you keep drinking, and she kicks you out. Somehow that comes out to the FAA. There are things like this that could become problematic. So that being said, you have to know what's going to trigger a concern for substance dependence. My concern being that if you don't meet one of those 4 criteria, now of course I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you, hey, don't take the advice of...
Just play one in court.
Don't take you need to take the advice of good medical counsel, for sure. But too often we see these situations where maybe individuals are working with folks that just find it all too easy to say, hey, jump into the HIMS program, go into the HIMS program because that's just what the FAA is going to expect. But maybe you don't meet that criteria. Maybe you had a DUI and your BAC was 0.15. In which case, the FAA might say, hey, we just need you to do some monitoring to prove abstinence and then maybe have a psych eval. They're not going to maybe make you jump into the full-blown HIMS program. So that's my concern. I want you to really consider your circumstances, really consider, do I meet these criteria, so that you can be informed as you're engaging with the individuals that are assisting you with the process, be it a HIMS AME, be it your union counsel, be it us, be it somebody else, be it your employer, or be it somebody, the HIMS folks at your employer, be it your wife, be it your priest. We want you to know for sure, hey, I could see how I meet that criteria, and I don't have a reason to push back. Now, there's been recent litigation about this type of issue, people feeling forced into the HIMS program, sort of a weapon, being used against them. So we just wanted to have people be thinking, rather than, hey, you got to go, you pack your bags, you're going right now. Okay, maybe that's necessary. But It's good to be informed, I would think. And the regulation is right there. I'm not giving you any secrets here. This is just what's out there, what they're doing, and what the Code of Federal Regulations says. Now, I think
what if you were giving them a secret? What big deal is that?
I don't know or care.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
what I'm saying.
I do care about secrets. I don't give them out. Ask my wife. I'm trying to lay a predicate for being a very good secret keeper. She can tell me things.
You're sure.
I guess the question is why should it be a secret?
Shouldn't be a secret. That's
the
thing.
problem. That's the
There
problem.
should be no secret. This should be very. This should be a public.
This should be plastered all over everything that the FAA says. Hey, you want to get a special issuance because you have substance dependence? Here's what you got to do. Boom, 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 boom.
Boom,
right?
boom, boom, boom.
There shouldn't be some, I don't know if this guy's really in recovery because he didn't do this at this time.
Well, we're about to get into that.
Oh, well.
But first, you thought I'd never bring it up. But
I was hoping you would.
Here's today's cockpit conundrum. Otherwise,
Option B.
Cockpit crisis. Okay, this one's called The Trouble with Tickets. The Trouble with Tickets. Now, this one I actually kind of created and massaged myself. An otherwise healthy airman is applying for a special issuance after a DUI.
You massage this guy?
Yes, sir. An otherwise healthy airman is applying for a special issuance after a DUI from 5 years ago. He had a low BAC, no accident, no injuries. He reported it within the 60 days as appropriate under 6115. He did all the right things. He reported it to the FAA on his medical application and voluntarily submitted a favorable substance abuse evaluation. The FAA, though, and there are processes as normal and a routine step and routine processes after the medical was issued. They sent the airman an information request and asked for a current driving record. The pilot thinks nothing of it. He had no alcohol or drug-related incidents since the DUI or before the DUI. This is a one-off DUI. But when the record arrives, it includes 11 speeding tickets in 8 years, 2 reckless driving charges, 4 license suspensions for failure to prepare, 4 license suspensions for failure to appear, and 1 incident of road rage captured in a police report, but never prosecuted. So, to recap, there are no new DUIs. This is the one DUI has already been issued on. No active criminal charges, no mention of psychiatric issues. Then the FAA's response comes after he submits the driving record. The FAA denies the airman's medical application. He's within 60 days of it being issued, so they can deny it. Or if it's after 60 days, they revoke it for a mental health concern, which renders the airman unable to safely perform the duties of a pilot. He's stunned. He, maybe a little angry, rips his mailbox out of the ground and throws it into his neighbor's garden.
He beats a garden gnome to death with it.
I never had a psych eval. I never lied. I don't have a diagnosis. So the conundrum here, a little bit of a puzzler, if you will, is how can an old DUI and a stack of motor vehicle violations, none reportable by themselves, none of them were reportable in and of themselves, except for the suspensions, they could be reportable at 18V. How could that add up to a psychological disqualification? And what exactly is the FAA seeing that the pilot isn't? I'll open the floor for discussion.
It's a personality disorder.
Bingo.
Correct. So one of the disqualifying conditions for the FAA under Part 67, Code of Federal Regulations, is 67.107A, 67.107, 207A, 307A.
It could also be subsection C
Subsection
of 107,
C.
207, 307.
Right. Identifies personality disorders. One of the specifically disqualifying conditions is a personality disorder which is so severe that it's manifested itself through repeat overt acts, right? Now it's questionable if this would actually happen per se. I've seen questions of it though before. But the FAA could say, well, hey, listen, maybe there's not a per se problem. It's not like you got DUIs here. Let's DUI do after DUI. But, looking at this, you look like a bad dude, right? So
On paper.
FAA attorney once told us that our client was a bad dude. So the question is, well, how do these events cause this concern? Well, the FAA would like to inquire lots of times to say, well, hey, you seem to have a problem being able to follow the rules of society. You're not following the rules of the road. You're not showing up for court. You're doing all these things which would suggest to us that, we consider those overt acts, perhaps. And, what's causing the overt act? And they could say, well, this looks like a manifestation of a personality disorder. Now, in that situation, you would push back and say, well, I need to have a neuropsychological evaluation to determine whether or not I even have a personality disorder, number one, in order for it to be so severe that it's manifested itself to repeat overt acts. And then if I do have a personality disorder, are these really overt acts? Or are they just, again, Alex, what would you call that? Fugazi. It's
fairy tales.
Yeah. So that being said, that's the cockpit conundrum. So back to the main subject here is, let's say you have to go into the HIMS program. Let's be clear on what that looks like. So for the HIMS program for the FAA, typically they're wanting to see, per the regulation, they're wanting to see recovery which is considered satisfactory to the federal air surgeon. So what that means is typically is that the FAA will want to see you engage in a 28-day inpatient treatment program or an intensive outpatient treatment program. Typically, they prefer that 28-day inpatient treatment program. Following engagement with the treatment program, they'll want you to engage in weekly group aftercare. So this should be a group setting, not individual most of the time, and it will be something that should be done at least weekly. And then following that, it's simultaneously the FAA will essentially expect you to engage in what they call a 90 and 90 peer-to-peer recovery activities where you're engaged in AA type meetings or smart recovery. We usually recommend that individuals obtain a sponsor early on in that process to help them through the steps.
Do they require all this to be done in person?
These days, yes. They're going to want that in person. And then they'll want you to engage a HIMS AME. Some airlines require that you work with specific AMEs. So you should ascertain who that is. And it might make sense to have a conference with that HIMS AME before or shortly after engaging treatment. Make sure you know who that HIMS AME is going to be so that you can initiate the ongoing monitoring once you've left treatment. Now, the ongoing monitoring is typically once monthly random urinalysis to prove abstinence. It could be a SoberLink device that you blow into. There could be PEth testing involved, which has a longer look back through blood testing for alcohol metabolites, PEth metabolites. So after you've engaged in this process, and as an ongoing process, the FAA will expect for you to have a HIMS psychiatric evaluation with a HIMS-trained psychiatrist, and also a neuropsychological evaluation, cognitive testing with a HIMS-trained neuropsychologist. Once all of this data is gathered, let me back up. If you're an airline person, typically they'll want you to have meetings with your chief pilot and possibly your peer pilot as well. But essentially, once all of this is gathered, that will be submitted to the FAA for consideration of their ascertainment, if that's a word, ascertainment
yeah.
of the quality of your recovery.
That's what the guy was doing on the street in Atlanta.
So that being said, our perspective here is that you may very well need to be in the HIMS program, but you should ascertain first whether or not you really qualify for that program first. And we want you to understand that if you do have to go into the HIMS program, this is sort of what you can expect. It's treatment and then aftercare with peer-to-peer recovery and monitoring, these two evaluations. And then from there, the FAA will expect you to continue on in the group aftercare, even after you've been issued your medical certificate. Once the weekly group aftercare, the AA meetings are sponsored, the monitoring with the HIMS AME, and the annual follow-up with the HIMS psychiatrist. But if you look at the FAA's HIMS step-down plan, that will eventually, what you have to do will eventually sort of fall off the requirements of a special issuance, especially if things are going well. So We hope that helps you prepare for what to expect when you're going into the HIMS program. I think that pretty much flogs this one pretty well. So, Alex, anything?
Hey, listen,
final thoughts, Christopher?
I got nothing.
All right, listener. Well, you've logged yet another uneventful half hour listening to the Pilot Lawyer podcast. And
there's a guy in the street in Atlanta that denies
knowing us or knowing that we saw him take care of himself.
In the buff.
Correct. Goodbye.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.